Welcome to BeFM Drama, where we turn great works of English literature into gripping radio. On today's episode, we're bringing you part 4 in our 5-part adaptation of In the Abyss, an 1898 work of early science fiction by the visionary author H.G. Wells. The story concerns the exploits of Elstead, an intrepid explorer who has designed a spherical steel submersible capable of surviving the intense pressures of the deepest ocean. With the assistance of a Royal Navy vessel and its crew, Elstead traveled to a point where the ocean floor lay more than 8 kilometers below the waves and set out on his expedition. His journey to the ocean floor was only meant to last a little more than a half hour, but something kept him down there for hours, until night fell and the naval ship above circled fruitlessly with its searchlights grazing the wavetops. Finally, after the crew and Elstead's colleagues had all but given up hope, his vessel emerged. Elstead was barely alive inside, exhausted and overheated, but the moment he regained his senses, he began to tell an incredible story. It's that story that we're listening to now, as he recounts how, after he arrived at the ocean floor, he found himself approached, quite inexplicably, by a large, upright figure. At first, he could see it only dimly, a faintly moving figure remotely suggestive of a walking man, and then it came into the spray of light that the lamp shot out. As the glare struck it, it shut its eyes, dazzled. Elstead stared in rigid astonishment. It was a strange, vertebrated animal. Its dark purple head was dimly suggestive of a chameleon, but it had such a high forehead and such a brain case as no reptile ever displayed before. The vertical pitch of its face gave it a most extraordinary resemblance to a human being. 2 large and protruding eyes projected from sockets in chameleon fashion, and it had a broad reptilian mouth with horny lips beneath its little nostrils. In the position of the ears were 2 huge gill covers, and out of these floated a branching tree of coralline filaments, almost like the tree-like gills that the very young rays and sharks possess. But the humanity of the face was not the most extraordinary thing about the creature. It was a biped. Its almost globular body was poised on a tripod of 2 frog-like legs and a strong, thick tail, and its forelimbs, which grotesquely caricatured the human hand much as a frog's do, carried a long shaft of bone tipped with copper. The color of the creature was variegated. Its head, hands, and legs were purple, but its skin, which hung loosely upon it, even as clothes might do, was a phosphorescent gray, and it stood there, blinded by the light. At last, this unknown creature of the abyss blinked its eyes open, and, shading them with its disengaged hand, opened its mouth and gave vent to a shouting noise, articulate almost as speech might be, that penetrated even the steel case and padded jacket of the sphere. How a shouting might be accomplished without lungs, Elstead did not profess to explain. It then moved sideways out of the glare into the mystery of shadow that bordered it on either side, and Elstead felt rather than saw that it was coming towards him. Fancying the light had attracted it, he turned the switch that cut off the current. In another moment, something soft dabbed upon the steel, and the globe swayed. Then the shouting was repeated, and it seemed to him that a distant echo answered it. The dabbing recurred, and the globe swayed and ground against a spindle over which the wire was rolled. He stood in the blackness and peered out into the everlasting night of the abyss, and presently he saw, very faint and remote, other phosphorescent quasi-human forms hurrying towards him. Hardly knowing what he did, Elstead felt about in his swaying prison for the stud of the exterior electric light, and came by accident against his own small glow lamp in its padded recess. The sphere twisted and then threw him down. He heard shouts like shouts of surprise, and when he rose to his feet, he saw 2 pairs of stalked eyes peering into the lower window and reflecting his light. In another moment, hands were dabbing vigorously at his steel casing, and there was a sound, horrible enough in his position, of the metal projection of the clockwork being vigorously hammered. That indeed sent his heart into his mouth, for if these strange creatures succeeded in stopping it, his release would never occur. Scarcely had he thought as much when he felt the sphere sway violently and the floor of it press hard against his feet. He turned off the small glow lamp that lit the interior and sent the ray of the large light in the separate compartment out into the water. The seafloor and the man-like creatures had disappeared, and a couple of fish chasing each other dropped suddenly by the window. He thought at once that these strange denizens of the deep sea had broken the wire rope and that he had escaped. He drove up faster and faster, and then stopped with a jerk that sent him flying against the padded roof of his prison. For half a minute, perhaps, he was too astonished to think. Then he felt that the sphere was spinning slowly and rocking, and it seemed to him that it was also being drawn through the water. By crouching close to the window, he managed to make his weight effective and roll that part of the sphere downward. But he could see nothing save the pale ray of his light striking down ineffectually into the darkness. It occurred to him that he would see more if he turned the lamp off and allowed his eyes to grow accustomed to the profound obscurity. In this way he was wise. After some minutes, the velvety blackness became a translucent blackness, and then, far away, and as faint as the starlight of an English summer evening, he saw shapes moving below. He judged these creatures had detached his cable and were towing him along the sea bottom. And then he saw something faint and remote across the undulations of the submarine plain, a broad horizon of pale luminosity that extended this way and that as far as the range of his little window permitted him to see. To this he was being towed, as a balloon might be towed by men out of the open country into a town. He approached it very slowly, and very slowly the dim irradiation was gathered together into more definite shapes. It was nearly 5 o'clock before he came over this luminous area, and by that time he could make out an arrangement suggestive of streets and houses grouped about a vast, roofless outcrop that was grotesquely suggestive of a ruined abbey. It was spread out like a map below him. The houses were all roofless enclosures of walls, and their substance being, as he afterwards saw, of phosphorescent bones, gave the place an appearance as if it were built out of drowned moonlight. Among the inner caves of the place, waving trees of crinoids stretched their tentacles, and tall, slender, glassy sponges shot like shining minarets and lilies of filmy light out of the general glow of the city. In the open spaces of the place, he could see a stirring movement as of crowds of people, but he was too many fathoms above them to distinguish the individuals in those crowds. Who are these alien residents of this unimagined underwater world? Are they like us, like human beings in their ability to reason? How must this alien being, this living man in his spherical coffin, appear to them? These beings for whom the ocean's surface is as distant as low Earth orbit is to us. They seem to have some purpose for Elstead as they drag him and his craft back in the direction of their strange otherworldly city, a luminous cluster of roofless shapes in the inky blackness, where the pressure is so enormous and so deadly. Are their intentions kindly? What will Elstead find when he is finally brought into their midst? We know that he will re-emerge eventually from under the waves, but we do not know how. Join us again here tomorrow evening as we answer these questions here on BeFM Drama in Part 5 of H.G. Wells' classic story, In the Abyss.